Howdy, everybody. Humanities Department, Humanities 4, Shasta College. How you doing? 109 today. Still hotter than you know what out there. Couple more days of that, then it drifts back down to tolerable temperatures. Hope you're staying cool, staying hydrated, taking care of yourself. Um, did you look at the essay number 3? It's Citizen Kane, classic masterwork. Why does it matter? Analyze it, look at it, look at the direction, look at the story, the themes behind it, many things behind it. Power would be one, wealth over people who don't have wealth, unrequited love. There's lots of themes in there. Identity, who am I? What do I represent? You can write about any of that. And now, if you listen to this lecture, you can steal that from me. That's the point of these lectures. You need to look at them because I am hopefully giving you guys some vital hints and information that will be help you run your papers and through this whole course. That's the point of it. If we're in a classroom, I'd be talking for 75 straight minutes. I'm going to try to keep this to 15 or 20. Okay, so the essay is due next week. Look at the instructions, read them carefully. 3 to 5 pages, minimally 3 to pages. What am I looking for? You're looking at what is the film. You're not telling me the plot of the film or the story of the film. You're talking about the characters, the script, the acting, the directing, which was all done by Orson Welles, a 25-year-old kid at the time. And he plays a very convincing older man. Orson was always old. Even when he was 12, he was directing plays. He was old then too. Anyway, hope you guys saw the little documentary I asked you to look at on Orson. It will help put this movie into context and how we got inspired and how it became this phenomenon. So Citizen Kane, that's essay 3, due next week. I think I had a discussion there. I've already forgotten what it was. If I didn't post one, I will post one. Did I post one? I have to go look. But I thank you guys. The last discussion we did, I really enjoyed your comments on comparing, the state of current cinema. What are you seeing in diversity and more inclusion on people, the other, as they say? Hollywood was white, very white, and very anti-homosexual. You never saw that ever in movies. You might hint at it. Some actors were what they call feminine, but they were never outed as gay. That was not even a term they used in those days. And so for most of its career up until the 80s, 70s, after blaxploitation films came out, you didn't see a lot of other besides white people. And so the diversity that we're seeing now in current films and including all sorts of nationalities and races and sexual orientation has never been done before. And that's the revolution that's going on in current cinema. A lot of the old timers who've been watching movies forever, they're not comfortable with it. And that's good. They should be. I hear complaints all the time from people my age going, "Oh, I can't stand all the graphic language or the graphic depiction of the other." That makes them feel uncomfortable. Well, that's good. They should be uncomfortable. They were excluded. African Americans, Mexicans, Asians were excluded from most of Hollywood films, except for playing maids and butlers and drug dealers. Now the inclusion is happening, and that's the revolution that's happening now. So good for you. Thank you for the discussion. I'll put another one up there. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I'll think of something clever. Anyway, that'll be up there for a week. The discussions always have a shelf life of usually a 1 week. I do. It's part of your participation. Do I grade them? No, but I go skim it to see who's participating, and sometimes I'll interject some stuff. But it's your discussion, not mine, unless I see it going off the rails, and then I got to bring it back somehow. Okay, so that's what's happening. Assignment wise, look at the book. We're all through. We're through chapter 4. Next week we'll start on chapter 5, but not yet. Today I'm going to talk about World War II and propaganda films. Citizen Kane was made right on the cusp of the war. We come out of the Depression. We're feeling pretty good about ourselves, except for Hitler was making a bad nuisance of himself in Europe. He had invaded Poland. He was about to invade France. He was bombing London. And they were asking for our help, but our Congress said, we don't want to be involved in another war. And so Roosevelt's hands were tied until Pearl Harbor. That changed everything. And that was 1941. And the week Citizen Kane came out, and it bombed at the box office because people had other things in their minds, other concerns like a world war instead of Hollywood. But Hollywood knows how to roll with the times. They roll with the culture. That's what I'm going to always talk about in this. What's happening in the culture? How does Hollywood reflect that, and vice versa? How is the culture being reflected in the movies? Well, this one's a good one. Because there's twofold. The We were taken off guards at Pearl Harbor. We didn't have much of an army or a navy at the time, and then a bunch of our navy was almost destroyed in Pearl Harbor because they got caught in the harbor there. They would never do that again in the whole history of our country, when they were going to have half of our navy stuck one place. And the Japanese came in and they kicked hell out of it. A lot of lives are lost. We didn't take very many casualties on their side. They got away with it, sneak attack. And now all of a sudden, we're going to, again, because Hitler is an ally to Japan, we're going to be involved in Hitler's war also. Much to the relief of Europe and England, who needs our help. But because we're behind the 8 ball on financing and the economy, supporting the war effort, we had to do all sorts of things really fast. And one of the things we did was war bonds. That's a certificate you could buy, and you could buy them usually a lot of times at a movie theater. $5, $10, $20, and that $20 goes to the war effort only, and you have the bond with you. Maybe it'll be worth something one day. So you're buying this war bond like you would a bond. It's a financial thing. I don't think anybody cashed them in, but because everybody wanted to give to the war effort right now, we had to ramp it up. The draft was started because there wasn't enough men in the army, and a draft was started. But everybody was joining up also. And so the workforce is being reduced, the male workforce in all the industries. And the war industry, we had to gear up, stop making cars. We never made any cars during this time. That's why you don't ever see any cars during, dates, 1943 Ford or something. It's a rarity. Everything went for the war effort. Instead of making cars, we made tanks and jeeps and ammunition and machine guns and battleships and airplanes. And who did all that work? Women. Women were called in to help because the men were going into the army. The male workforce was being depleted, and women stepped up. They had, for the first time in our history, women had an equal standing in the workplace out of necessity. And they made the bullets, they made the machine guns, they helped make the planes, the boats, everything to get the war effort going. They worked in the factories. to get it going, and they were open 24/7. Everybody gave to the war effort. Everybody's on board. So what did Hollywood do? Well, besides raising money, which they're good at, they started making war films, and they made for one purpose: propaganda. Propaganda to help sell the war. So if you look at some great war films from that era, but if you watch them, a lot of times they star John Wayne. Yes, he became a big, huge star because of the war, because he didn't go, folks. You could opt to stay home if you have kids, and he opted to stay home. And John Ford, the famous director who made him famous, didn't like that. He thought everybody should serve, and he felt John was being a coward, and it put a wedge in their relationship. But John Wayne in his war films raised a lot of money for the war effort, so he did his job, folks. And he just wasn't over there fighting in the trenches. He was fighting in the fake trenches of Hollywood, and people were giving millions of dollars to buying the bonds where his movies were being played. And lots of Hollywood stars were raising money. And a lot of Hollywood stars, believe it or not, joined the military. They put their careers on hold. A couple of them I could think of offhand. If you don't know who Tyrone Power is, he was a pretty big star at the time. Played Zorro. He joined. Jimmy Stewart was a big star at the time. He joined. Clark Gable's wife was killed during the war, raising money for war bonds, and he joined as soon as she was killed. He became he flew in the Pacific, and these were celebrities, but they put him into real situations. Um, there's a little documentary, I'm going to post it today, called Hollywood Goes to War. You'll see how many famous, for their time, you might not know them, but they were famous, joined the military and put their career on hold, and they were risking their lives. Now, I always ask this in the class, if we were in a class, I would say, can you imagine Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or Bradley Cooper, whoever your favorite is right now, quitting their careers to go fight in the Ukraine or in Afghanistan or wherever there's some war going on? Can you imagine that? Either can I, because it has never happened. During the when we got the World Trade Center got taken down, and we went to war with. Pardon my coughing. Hopefully, I got some water left. We sent troops over the Gulf War. The second one, we had a first one in the 90s, and the second one was after the World Trade Center came down. And of course, we went to war with the wrong country, but whatever. That's another story I won't get into. And a lot of guys joined the military. One of them was a football player who had just signed a fancy $1 million, $3 million contract. Pat Tillman was a football star in college. He signed a professional contract. He put it on hold and joined up because he felt he needed to go do this. He felt it was the right cause and that his career could be put on hold. Well, guess what, folks? Pat Tillman was killed. Now, when he was killed, George Bush Jr. was in the White House, and they, of course, said he was a hero. He wasn't. They used him for propaganda. This is what happens with the government lying to the people and saying, well, he died a hero defending his country. He did not. He was killed with friendly fire, meaning our guys killed him accidentally. But when you're in combat, sometimes you don't know who the hell you're shooting at. And he was shot from behind, and they found out it was our own guys that shot him. But they made this big thing in the press. There's a documentary. I'll show a little bit of a documentary for you if you want to watch it. Hope you do. The Pat Tillman story, because it's heartbreaking. Here's this idealistic young football star just starting his life, killed in combat in a far off Mideast country. Uh, and then his death was used by Washington, D.C. and the Bush administration, saying, you see, he gave his life for this great cause, and and people were giving money like crazy because of that. Well, they found out, and Pat Tillman's parents thought he died a hero. They used them in this propaganda machine. Once they found out the truth, how he was killed, and that it wasn't a noble killing or heroic, he didn't kill him. It wasn't. He was killed by his own guys. Well, they came out against it. It's in the documentary, and they came out against the Bush administration for using their son's death to promote their war. Propaganda is huge. And now, with all the media everywhere, 24 hours news, it's even bigger than ever. But during World War II, the propaganda was not as immediate. We didn't have 24-hour news. We didn't have videotape. So there was newsreels that would come out once a week. And then you'd see them at the movie theaters because nobody had TVs. There's no TV yet. So it's all radio, printed news, and these newsreels that you saw at the movie theater. You'd watch the newsreel about what's going on in the Pacific, what's going on fighting Hitler. And by the way, they never show any dead bodies of our soldiers. We show dead bodies of the enemy, of course. That's where the propaganda comes in. We're telling a slightly cleaned up story, like we're the heroes and we don't die. The other guy dies for his country. Well, we know that's not true. And that's how they raise money. John Wayne was making these movies where America was always the good guy. We never did anything sneaky like the Japanese or brutal like the Nazis. We weren't like that. We were, folks. We didn't start. Ow, oh, 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 I've got a pain in my arm. Sorry. Um, we were like that. We just didn't want to believe we were the same. If you guys saw Saving Private Ryan, there's a scene in there where after the D-Day landing, our guys, the Germans are trying to give up. They're coming up, their hands held high, and these guys are just executing them. And that happened. So war does horrible things to every side. Okay, so we wanted them to be heroes. And so John Wayne is a hero. Lots of actors are out there. Van Johnson had a huge career. Yeah, he was 4F, but he made lots of films, and it helped the war effort. And all those films made America out to be the complete hero. We didn't do anything shady. We don't torture people. We don't execute people. Yes, we do, folks. Hate to say it. We don't do it. We don't show it. And the money came into the war machine. And the women were making the tanks and the machine guns and the bullets from the proceeds from those movies. Hollywood really raised millions of dollars a day. And everybody felt good about it. This was a righteous war. Hitler was definitely a bad guy. Japan were bad. They sneaked attacked on us. Now we're great friends with both Germany and Japan. Just shows that time heals all wounds. But in those days, they were the arch enemy of democracy, American way of life. Not just that, but democracy around the world. South America, Europe, not so much China because they were communist, but we helped China. We helped them fight. We were on their side. We fought as allies. We fought with the Russians, who was communist. They were called the Soviet Union. They were against Nazis, and so were we. And so we fought with them. They were our allies. And so Everything's going for the war effort, and Hollywood came calling. Now, the war is winding down. The losses are huge. Japan, we firebombed Japan, meaning our planes firebombed Tokyo. This is before we dropped the atom bomb on them. Uh, Tokyo was a city made of wooden structures. And when we firebombed them, it burned. We almost burned Tokyo to the ground. So we were getting some payback. In Germany, we were bombing cities way deeply into Germany. We bombed the holy hell out of Berlin. Civilians, folks, too. We never got bombed here because they didn't have the ways and means to get to our shores, but we were protected. If you've ever been to San Francisco at go look at Fort Funston. That's an old uh, army base. They were waiting for Japan to attack America. They never did quite get here. They did. They actually sent some reconnaissance submarines and balloons, but they never came. We were waiting for an invasion. East Coast was waiting for an invasion from Germany. They just didn't have the ways and means. A couple submarines, folks, went up the Hudson River, though, as looking for reconnaissance. So they were out there. They just didn't have the ways and means to do an invasion, or there's no plane that would fly across the Atlantic and drop bombs and get home. It didn't exist. And so we were safe from our isolation because of the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And nobody's going to come up through Mexico or through Canada because that's a huge country and they were our allies. And so invasion was really slim. But we were waiting for it. In the meantime, a bunch of directors, I want you guys to look at this documentary. You don't have to watch the whole thing. I'm going to post. It's up to you if you want to watch it. It's called Five Came Back. 5 Hollywood directors who had very large Hollywood careers: John Ford, Frank Capra, John Huston. Hold on. I'm almost there. I'm forgetting William Wyler, who was actually from Germany. And the last one would be he directed Giant. I'm going to forget his name right now. I'll come up with it. Anyway, they were all put their careers on hold, and they're all successful Hollywood directors. John Ford won the Academy Award. John Huston was just getting started. He directed Humphrey Bogart and so many movies, and wrote the scripts. African Queen, Treasure, Sarah Madre. He had already written a couple scripts, Maltese Falcon, and he was up and coming. These other guys, Frank Capra, he wrote about the movie Maybe It Happened One Night. He directed that, amongst other things. Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington. William Wyler directed Mrs. Miniver, which is a great propaganda World War II film. These directors put their careers on hold to join the military. They are all too old to go fight, so they they drafted them into a cinema corps, a film corps. They were given the instructions to film the war. They had offices in Washington, D.C. Frank Capra was the head guy, and these filmmakers were given money and budgets, camera crews to go film the war, wherever it was. John Ford, who directed Stagecoach and Al Greener's My Valley and Grapes of Wrath, and worked on John Wayne many, many times, was in the Battle of Midway. He was on a naval boat filming not just him, but his camera crew, and he was wounded twice in a kamikaze attack. It's in the documentary, and he was given the Purple Heart. He was probably 62 years old at the time. The other guys, Frank Capra was given the mission to film the D-Day invasion, and they sent all these camera crews out there to film it. And if you've seen Private Ryan or any footage of the D-Day invasion, that's his guys. A lot of them were killed. They didn't have guns, folks. They had cameras. A lot of the film footage was lost because they'd be shot and the camera would fall into the ocean. And that would be it. So he's filming the invasion at D-Day. George Stevens is the other director. Finally got him. He directed. He did a lot of musicals in his early days, very successful musicals, and he was considered kind of a lightweight director, but very successful. When he got out of the war, he directed Giant, Diary of Anne Frank, and some devastating movies. He filmed one of their first concentration camps. We knew about them. We'd read about them. He filmed it. I don't know which one it is. It's in the documentary. It's one of the big ones where they discovered all the dead bodies. He filmed that. These guys all came back from the war changed. They were no longer the same. War will do that for you. You'll see carnage. And they told the Hollywood producers that they could no longer be the same filmmaker. If you want the same films out of us that we did before the war, we can't do it. We've seen too much. And so John Ford was still, the war was over. Hitler was even dead. The war kept going on. A couple of months after Hitler killed himself, it was over though for most part in Germany. Japan still hadn't surrendered yet. We hadn't dropped the bomb on them yet. And so Hollywood says, we want you to direct a movie. And he said, well, I'll direct this movie, but it has to be my way 100%. And they go, well. And so he says, I won't do it the other way. I'm not going to make a propaganda film showing us as the heroes and we win everything, because we didn't win everything. We lost a lot of battles. So he made this very wonderful movie called They Were Expendable. Think about the title, folks. They Were Expendable. About the early rise of the PT boat in the Pacific, which was developed early on in the war as a small craft that would go fight the destroyers, Japanese destroyers. Well, folks, a lot of those guys were killed. They were slaughtered. And it was tough getting the financing, and the war, and the movie covers that. And it does end on a high note. It ends in like 1942 when we've been getting literally our ass handed to us by Japan. Essentially, the famous quote, MacArthur said, well, I shall return. Well, we did return, and we kicked some major ass and won the war, but it took another 4 years of a lot of savage brutality, a lot of payback. Well, so he came out of the war wanting to make that movie. William Wyler said, I want to make this movie about returning veterans and how they try to adjust to life and how it's not pretty. And they go, hold on, it's going to look like these guys are damaged. Now, everybody coming out of a war like that has post-traumatic stress, but we didn't know what it was called. We called it shell shock. And so a lot of the men were alcoholics. My dad's entire generation was alcoholics. My dad came out of the war an alcoholic because they'd seen things and didn't have therapy or psychiatrists to go talk it over, medication, so they drank. And so this follows 3 veterans that are coming home and back into civilian society, won a bunch of Academy Awards. And it's a brilliant film, and it's real. Nobody has an easy time coming back from the war. It's not all like, oh, we welcome you back, thanks for fighting the war. It's like, oh, well, we got on with our lives while you were gone fighting the war. And then George Stevens directed The Diary of Anne Frank, from the bestseller book that Anne Frank, the Jewish girl that was hid up in an attic for 4 years before she was discovered her family, and she was shipped off to a concentration camp, died in the camp, but she wrote this diary. That's his movie. They all came back wanting to do something meaningful. Frank Capra came back and did It's a Wonderful Life. Now, you've probably seen that during Christmas. Well, that's a depressing movie. If you look at it, it's not a happy movie. The guy, the main character, is going to kill himself because he feels he's not needed. Nobody even notices him in the town. And then the angel comes down and shows him his life in the town without him, and that his life did have meaning. Well, when they made that movie, Hollywood said, "This is such a bummer. We don't even want to release it." And James Stewart, who was in the war, that was his first movie coming back, the actor, he said, "My career's over. This movie is going to kill my career. It's done." Well, now you might know that film as a classic, and they show it every Christmas because the movie takes place during Christmas. It's a feel good movie about a guy who wants to kill himself, who doesn't feel like his life has mattered. And so this is what they wanted to do, these filmmakers. John Huston directed so many movies after that, To Have and to Have Not, and Treasure Sarah Madre, which is to me one of the most brilliant movies ever made. But these are hard hitting, no happy ending, no propaganda. It's realism, which I'm going to talk about next week when we get into a new way of filming movies called neorealism. So that's my speech on World War II. I know I went too long. Hope you guys get through it and try to enjoy this last hot weekend. I think it is supposed to cool off in about 3 days. Attack your essay with everything you've got. Show me your brilliance. Don't copy and paste anything. Do some research. Look at the movie. Actually, try to enjoy the movie too, and try not to be judgmental about how the movie's in black and white or it's not like they are now. That's not what your assignment is. The movie was a game changer. Citizen Kane. Why? You find out. Also, there's a question I want you all to answer. You have to come up with some kind of viable answer. It's a mystery. And a word is used in the movie several times called rosebud. It's the iconic mystery that has haunted Hollywood for 100 years. I want you to identify it with rosebud. You'll find out what it is, but what does it mean? As an object, you'll find out what it is. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you to ask, what is the meaning of rosebud? You could be wrong, folks. Yes, you can. I just want you to look at that question and have a sentence or two about it. See you next week where the story of film continues. All